Hello, this is Charles Harrington, and I am the guidebook author for the Odyssey Oracle, which was illustrated by Paolo Barbieri. And it is a deck that tells the story of Homer's Odyssey, an incredible thousands and thousands of year old tale of high adventure, gods and heroes, monsters, and mayhem. It is a beautiful deck, I happen to think, and I'm excited to walk you through it. So, this is not a proper review in the sense that I cannot give you an unbiased review of the deck. You can find other reviews on YouTube by people who can talk to you about whether or not they like the card stock or if they think the images are good enough. But I can give you two things that they can't. I have the original art file that I got to work off of to write the guidebook with the beautiful art, and I can show you that. And I can tell you about my process and give you a behind the scenes look at creating an Oracle deck and a little bit about what the cards mean. So, if you're an Oracle and tarot card deck nerd like I am, and you like want sort of DVD commentary style look at the creation of one of these, stick around. That's what this is. By the way, if you just want to see really great versions of the cards and you want to see the pretty art and you don't want to hear me talk about my process, you can just skip ahead a little bit. You'll find the card images, and I'm not going to know. I'll have no idea that you did. My feelings will not be hurt. You don't have to listen to me yammer about, deck biases and, how to create a fully. It just I won't. I'll have no idea. So go right ahead. Anyway. Okay, so what are my bona fides, and am I the guy to do one of these? I'd like to think so. Okay, so I've written a few guidebooks for Los Scarabeo decks, but so for all of these, I was not a part of the process for designing the art. The art was fully created when I came onto the process. I did uh, help create the scenes for Tarot of the Vampires with Llewellyn, and I am the author of Tarot and Oracle card reading for Dummies, which just came out. I think it's pretty good and available where fine books are sold. But more to the point for this deck, I did the guidebook for the Dante's Inferno Oracle, which Paolo Barbieri did. And so that's why they selected me for this guidebook. And that one is both a book and an Oracle deck that Paolo illustrated based on Dante Alighieri's beautiful illustrations for the first um, third of the Divine Comedy that takes the reader through the dark and treacherous, twisty, windy paths through hell. And it was a harrowing journey and a good one. But I am much, much, much more familiar with Homer's Odyssey. So I feel as though for a long time people were much more interested in the Iliad. It's got those beautiful, tragic portrayals of Hector and Achilles and Andromache and all of the rest. But in recent years, the Odyssey has gotten a resurgence for a few reasons. And I'm a Greco-phile. I've loved the classics, and I've read three verse translations of the Odyssey. Now, I think it's very important to read a verse translations of the Odyssey if you can. I noticed when I've seen people talk about so this deck and other things about the Odyssey, they note that they really haven't read the Odyssey since college, and a lot of times in college they have you read a prose translation, which are fine. A prose translation, they've just taken the text and they've made it into an easy to read sort of paragraph retelling of the text. In a verse translation, the author, pardon me, the translator has taken the text and they've chosen a particular meter. So if you think about like Shakespeare is written in iambic pentameter, there's a certain number of syllables per line. That the translator has chosen. So it creates a more poetic more active, more dynamic feel to the text. It's quite exciting. So I've read the Fitzgerald, the Fagles, and the most recent Emily Wilson. So of these, I do love the Fagles. It is a very exciting, dynamic, beautiful, metaphoric take on the poem. But if you're going to start with the Odyssey, please start with the Emily Wilson. It's a beautiful translation. It's a very approachable translation. In her notes, she talks about how when people translate something like the Odyssey, they set it in like your grandparents' English, and she sets it in our current English. She's not dumbing it down, she's just making it accessible. And she also uh, goes back to what the original words meant. What do I mean? People sometimes try to clean up the Odyssey and they try to take away things that are uncomfortable. For example, when we're talking about Odysseus's household, we talk about his butler, his manservant, his, houseboy, all these things. And the original word was just slave because Odysseus had enslaved people in his household because people of his station at that time in Greek history, that's what they had. And people are uncomfortable with that. And so a lot of people found this controversial with her translation, but um, it's what it is. Also, people found some things uncomfortable. So, for example, Penelope is a talented weaver, and the text talks about her muscular hands and other people talked about didn't like that because it's not feminine enough. So anyway, it's a beautiful translation by Emily Wilson. So if you're at all interested in the Odyssey, it's a wonderful work, and it's the one that I'd read all of these, but it's the one I returned to when working on the guidebook for the Odyssey Oracle. Um, but I think the main reason so many people, especially magical people, are so interested in the Odyssey today is the beautiful novel Circe by Madeline Miller. It really started a renaissance of uh, sci-fi fantasy retellings of Greek mythology lately. And of course, if you're into Circe, I really highly recommend the 1990s TV miniseries where Bernadette Peters plays Circe. You gotta love it. Anyway, diving back into I'm sorry. Before I dive back in, there is an upcoming version of the Odyssey where Christopher Nolan is directing it, and Matt Damon will be playing the titular hero. Anyway, okay, there's a lot going on with the Odyssey. It's a great time. As a matter of fact, the Rafe Fiennes just starred in a version of it where it just focuses on the return. It's called The Return. It's just when he gets back to Ithaca. Now, here's my process for the deck. I wanted each card to have three things. A quote from the poem. I took all of these from a public domain version, translation of the poems, which meant it had to come from the 1800s. At the end of the day, these were all cut because there wasn't enough space at the end for them. And it was a sad day for me when I opened the deck and I saw that they'd all been cut for space, alas. But those older translations, not the easiest to read. I understand why they were cut. The journey section lets you know what's happening in the image. So you're going to be shuffling these cards. They're not going to be in order. So whenever you look at a card, you're going and you look in the guidebook. You're going to know what is happening to Odysseus and the other characters on the card, and guidance. So, Oracle decks tend toward advice readings and self-help readings as opposed to predictive readings. And that also can be very true with a deck like this one where we know what the story is. So, we know what's happening in the card. That makes it a little harder for it to be a predictive deck. That sounds counterintuitive, probably, because if we know what's happening to the Cyclops in the card, wouldn't that make it easier for us to know what's going to happen in your situation? Makes it it can be a little too close to home. So I think people prefer for that to be more of a self-help or a guidance tool. But that's just for the guidebook. You, the reader, the talented, powerful oracle that you are, the diviner that you are free to use this tool as a predictive tool. I have used it myself as a predictive tool already. But The guidebook itself is going to give guidance style advice readings. Anyway, here's my process for writing the guidebook. It's a lot. This is a lot goes into the creation of these things. This is not a fly-by-night operation. So the first thing I do is I receive the art file from Lo Scarabeo and I go through the whole thing and I make initial notes for what I think the direction I think I'm going to go in for each of the cards. And then going card by card, I reread the story for each of the images from the Emily Wilson translation. Now, on top of that, I have sort of my interpretation of what's going on in the story. In addition to that, kind of going back to the old, college days, I also read the analysis from both Spark Notes and Cliff Notes because, I have my interpretation, but I also defer to expertise. So I wanted to see if there's anything I was missing from the text as to what is going on in these passages, so I could glean more information or additional gems from the text. So I got additional insights there. So then I wrote, after all of that process and all of that note taking for every single card, I wrote an initial interpretation for every single card in the deck. And then, once I'd done all of that, I went back through and I read everything I'd written for the entire deck because with a deck based on a cohesive story like the Odyssey, it's very easy for some of the cards to be too samey, for some of the cards to appear to give too similar a message. For example, a lot of the Odyssey is Odysseus tricking people, getting one over on people, outthinking them. And that's amazing for a story, especially a story that is in an oral tradition in which the singers were telling the story without, being able to refer to their notes. But in an oracle deck, you don't want every single card to mean, outwit your opponent. So this gives you an opportunity to go back and create differences between the cards. And I'll get into that when we get into the cards. Also, once you've written all the cards, when you go back through it, you can also see where there are things that are missing. Are there messages that you'd like the deck to share that haven't found their way into the text yet? So it's a lot. So here we go. Okay. Oh, very important. All tarot decks and especially oracle decks have a bias. They just do. And it's important for readers and guidebook writers to be aware of that bias. So some guidebooks are on the fluffier, huggier side. They're going to mostly contain messages of empowerment and softness and connection and love and healing. A deck like the Odyssey Oracle is going to have a bias towards overcoming obstacles, fighting for what you believe in, we already talked about overcoming, deception, in the face of adversity. So it's the deck guidebook for the most part has to be authentic to the source. We can't have too many of the cards giving advice that is counter to the ideals of the Odyssey and of Homer. So, for example, in Homer, people do not betray the gods. They do not dishonor the gods. They do not dishonor their families. There's nothing in in the deck about abandoning your family. Therefore, none of the cards could suggest that. There's not cards about giving up because in the Odyssey, you don't give up. Odysseus, no matter when he's at his worst, doesn't give up. So, for example, in the tarot, you might have the Eight of Cups, which is a card that can, for some be the card of giving up, turn back. It's okay to let this one go. That's not a value in the Odyssey, so that's not going to show up in the deck. Anyway, so that's okay for an Oracle deck, and you just have to be aware of that bias when you're writing the guidebook, and also you, the reader, when you're picking it up off of your shelf, you have to be aware of that bias. Anyway, that's my soapbox moment. So how does that show up in the text itself? So the bias of the Odyssey Oracle is towards intelligence. Odysseus, he's crafty, and he's always going to be outwitting his opponents. He's very passionate, and the text is filled with people's, you know, dramatic emotional moments. They're weeping, you know, on page after page throughout the Odyssey. This is an action-oriented deck. People are violent in their opposition of their enemies. And this is a story of perseverance. People keep on going. They get up and they keep moving towards their journey's end. All right. Okay, that's enough out of me. Let's go ahead and take a look at the cards. So here is the beautiful art as I got to see it when I came onto the project. Let's go ahead and go into present mode. Okay. So Sacred Storyteller, this is the muse. So famously, the story of the Odyssey begins with the narrator calling upon the muse to help them to tell the story itself. So I actually begin the guidebook with "Sing in me, O divine muse, and bring forth a tale of heroes and monsters, gods and calamities, and above all else, the exceptional mortal mind that navigates treacherous seas to find the way home." Sorry, I had to grab some water there. I'm going to give a little bit of information about each of the cards, just so you can get some insights into what the deck is all about. This is one of the great things that you get to do when you write the guidebook is you get to name every card, and I am a pretty self-indulgent, dramatic purple card titler. So this is Sacred Storyteller. This card is all about divine inspiration and lighting that creative fire and you know, finding something that's going to be thought-provoking for you. And I just love the way that Paolo Barbieri, you creates uses scrolls both as her clothing, but also as her maybe that's not her clothing, but as her hair. It's just a really cool way to work that into the character. This one is called, and I apologize. So, of course, when I received the file, you know, there's no titles. I got to add that, so you won't get to see that. But this is Clash of the Olympians, because as a child of the 80s, I was a big fan of the movie Clash of the Titans. So this one is about creative conflict and how, um, you know, it's okay. Like conflict can lead to interesting results, and we don't always have to give up and give in on our ideas. And this is the moment when Athena goes to her father on Olympus and demands the release of Odysseus. Now, specifically, there's a couple cards that are about conflict, and this one is about conflict of words and using your words to win over your opponent, you know, which is what Athena does. This one is Unweaving Fate. Now, when I got my copy of the deck in the mail, this was the first card I drew, which felt pretty important given the question I was asking. And I just love how stylistic Paolo Barbieri is. He does not go for a realistic, you know, Greek Dark Age depiction of the scene. That's a beautiful, beautiful take on this scene, like the loom of Penelope. So this moment, famously, Penelope tells the suitor she's weaving her father-in-law's death shroud, and then unweaves it every night because she won't marry them until she's finished the shroud. So this is your ability to undo things. Like things aren't set in stone. You can change, you know, you can even change the past. Like things, just because things have happened doesn't mean that they're stuck that way. And you can unstick things. And I just love the blue, the cool tones, the way the moon is drawn. Isn't that stunning? Anyway, I was in awe of it. This is Calypso's Castaway. And one of the great things Paulo does. So in historical decks that you see sometimes, the lady characters can all have sort of have the same haircut. You know, like this is the Greek lady haircut. This is he does just wonderful things with hair, especially when we get to Circe. But this is a card about getting up and going forward, even though things seem stuck. Odysseus has been on her island for 7 years at this point, and he's been working out. Look at his abs, y'all. Like, my goodness. Anyway, um, this card is all about you can do incredible things and it's time to shake off your doubts. So get going. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sure I have more thoughts about this card, but his abs are just breathtaking. Anyway, here we go. Lord of Tempests. I use the word of a lot in the titles, I noticed. It's sort of like a YAA fantasy novel thing. This card is about insurmountable forces, when things that are set against you that just are almost impossible to overcome. Now, this is kind of a controversial idea. The tendency with Oracle decks in particular is to tell the reader that they can do anything that they set their minds to and that everything is possible and they just need to believe in themselves and just find a way. And that's not life. Sometimes things are just big and you just need to make, I do mention like looking for a silver lining. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to find something different. But Odysseus sets out and he thinks he's on his way back to Ithaca. And his arch enemy Poseidon is just, did I just say Poseidon? Poseidon. It's like, nah, bro. And smashes his raft and sets him adrift. And it works out. But this card is the card of like, no, this isn't going to work out the way you'd like it to. And I think I do believe as an oracle, as a diviner, it's important that sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes in readings that I've received, the answer has been no. Like I could be your best friend and tell you what you want to hear, but the answer is no. So this is a rough card. I hope you don't get this card too often. But if you do get it, it's a good reason. This is the ill-fated gift card. Now, so as I mentioned earlier, you don't want a deck to have the same meaning over and over and over and over again. And so a lot of the cards in this deck are about deception because that's Odysseus, right? And so you have to figure out a creative ways, the guidebook author, to make that, find new ways to make that the meaning for the card. So in this case, I thought that this is from the perspective of the Trojans. We're looking up at the Trojan horse, the famous Trojan horse. So in this case, this is you're not the deceiver, you probably are the deceived. And this card is all about like, beware of Greeks bearing gifts and look around at your surroundings, be careful. Things are not as they seem. And two things I love about this card. One, famously, I'm going to use the word famously like 900 times in this video probably, but famously, the Trojan horse was constructed from the Greeks' ships. And I think Paolo did an amazing job of making this horse not look like just like a perfectly carved wooden horse, but making it using the design of a Greek ship to make it. And then two, I love how Athena, who's masterminded a lot of these plots, appears in the clouds as this sort of misty figure. Athena is, of course, Odysseus's patron through much of this, and I don't know, it's a beautiful card. So there's ill-fated gift, a taste of lotus. So most of the time, it's very important that the meaning of the card really gel with the values of the text. And um, there's there's times to make little exceptions for that. So, for example, in the Dante's Inferno card, I remember asking Lo Scarabeo about there's the Cleopatra card in there, and I was like, it just the text doesn't think very highly of her, but the artist really seemed to, and we agreed that this card that was a more positive card. So in this one, I kind of meet halfway on this one. The sailors go to the island where people eat the lotus and forget their past. And normally this card is about like not giving, sorry, in the story, the message is you don't want to bite the lotus, you want to persevere and keep going. But the image really seems to be conveying like a need for rest and relax and repose. And so I kind of meet halfway in the text about relaxing just enough, but to keep going. Because there are several cards whose messages keep going. And when I was doing my final review, I realized that like there was a repeat there. And so this was revised to reflect that, like just, pampering yourself enough so that you can restore yourself in the way that you need. So, okay, so a true lover of the Odyssey might take issue with that particular interpretation. And to you, I say, I am sorry. Savage Shores. So several of the cards show the heroes arriving at various islands. That's the images are originally created for a an illustrated edition of the Odyssey with excerpts from the poem. And it was all then those images were also created into the Oracle deck. And so there's scenes of arriving at the islands and then scenes of the islands. And that meant the guidebook has to be very creative about how to differentiate these things. But what I love is that, this is a fantasy version of the Odyssey. So the islands are very different. These are not just Greek islands. These are, or Mediterranean islands. These are like just super like stylized fantasy. So this is the Isle of the Cyclops or the Cyclopes. And so therefore it's got this, fabulous eye motif on it. So you know where you know where they are. You know what's about to happen. They may not know. So this is called Savage Shores. I debated the use of the word savage and I went with it. This card is about being aware of your impact on other people in a potentially negative way. There's a card later on about the importance of your legacy and the positive impact you have on others. And there's also a note in the book about earlier about scaling your universe to the Odyssey universe. In the Odyssey universe, he's dealing with giant, sea monsters and battles, and that's not something you're going to encounter. So when you're dealing with any kind of deck, these are metaphors, So it's important to not get too scared. So when you're thinking about your impact on your friends, you're probably not going to get them eaten. You're going to maybe get them like late or inconvenienced. So this is a warning to think about the impact you have on other people. Gaze of the Cyclops. Fun fact, there's speculation that the myth or the legend of the Cyclops has to do with people uncovering mammoth skulls and seeing that big hole at the center where the mammoth trunk was, and speculating that that might have been an eye for some extinct creature. So whether that's true or not, who can say? But it's kind of a cool story. So the Cyclops is defeated by blinding it because it has that one eye. And so this card is all about the dangers of a myopic worldview. So you want to have a broader worldview, not too narrow a vision. I think this is probably the most iconic monster from the Odyssey. But just be cautious. Like, okay, this was a much lighter deck than, well, this is a slightly lighter deck than the Inferno, but there are a lot of harrowing images. This is not a cuddly Oracle deck. The House of the Winds. So here Odysseus arrives at the island of Aeolus, and card is all about some necessary help. So again, you have to be careful about cards being too matchy-matchy. So Taste of Lotus is a need for relaxation, and this is about needing charity from others. Now, there's a later card about needing assistance from others. These are fine distinctions, between these things. And it's sort of there's going to be similarities. They still have to stick to the story, but this is the trick for the Oracle writer. Binding of the Storms. So Aeolus, one thing to note here, there's different art styles throughout the deck. There's two art styles. There's these sort of full color images, and then there's also sepia tones. That's what was in the book. So you'll see those two different art styles appearing. These are more like concept art, sort of sketch art quality, and I think it's pretty cool. So this is the god of the winds, and he helps Odysseus by binding all of the other winds, the winds that won't help Odysseus, in a bladder, which is what he's got holding in his hand, so that the wind that will speed Odysseus back to Ithaca can be was the only one that is loose, and that sends Odysseus home, except unfortunately Odysseus's men are suspicious and they release the wind. So on two different levels, this card is all about not giving into their impulses. The impulses of the winds, you've got to cage those, and then the impulses of his crewmen. A storm of stones. Oh, the tricky part about naming cards is you don't want too many of the cards to have the same words in them. And I really tried. I tried to like with like different thesauruses to find like words that were like satisfying but didn't have storm in both of them, and we already had Tempest on the Poseidon card, Lord of Tempests. So having two cards in a row, this is the was it Binding of the Storms? Yes, Binding of the Storms, and then a Storm of Stones. At the end of the day, it was better to have the better names on the cards than and have that repeated word. But I did try. This story is often taken or not included when people do retellings of the Odyssey because it's so similar to the Cyclopes. But these are the giants that Odysseus goes to their island and they eat several of more of his men. So this card is all about knowing when to peace out, to knowing when to be nimble and escape quickly from a situation. So now, if you came to Odysseus through the story of Circe, this is a card you've been waiting for. This is Malevolent Metamorphosis, and this card is all about knowing when you're being affected by others and being transformed by others. Too often we think of ourselves as entirely self-directed and entirely whole and completely our own, creation. And the reality is we are impacted by so many things from our chemistry to our environment to the words that other people use. So this is just being aware of the impact things are having on us. Trickster's Gift. This is Hermes, and look how, even though Hermes is young and even a little cherubic here, look how massive he is as a god compared to mortal Odysseus. So, again, we can't have too many things be about deception. So, this card showing Odysseus receiving the herb moly, which will allow him to withstand Circe's magic, is a card suggesting purification, meditation, and any kind of spiritual work that's going to allow you to withstand the forces that are arrayed against you. So doing that inner work to be purified. Now here's the card that when I was going through the art file, this is the card I was just waiting for. As a magical person, as a fan of the Odyssey, Circe is my favorite character, and perhaps yours, dear viewer. So I was really, really excited for this card. I'll be honest, at first I wasn't sure about this hairdo, but I do really think it's fun. And I love that her headdress has the boar motif in it, since Circe so famously um, transforms men into swine, the swine that they are. For anyone who's European, I know the European pronunciation is Kirky, but I don't know, as an American, we all say Circe. Um, this is Mistress of Magic is the name of the card, which is a really fun name. This card is all about manifestation and seeing the world the way you want it to be and making it that way. This is the card of using your own power, the just using your abilities, just visualizing the way things ought to be and making that happen. And it's the magic card. It is the card of inner transformation and outer transformation. It's my favorite card in the deck. I hope you draw it very often. I hope I draw it very often. Anyway, I must move on. I don't want to, but I must. Voyage at Dawn. Beautiful card. This is the essence of the Odyssey. This is just, and we set out again at dawn. So rose-fingered dawn refers to Eos, the goddess of dawn. She lights up the sky, and the heroes venture forth again and again. Here they're setting out for the darkest leg of the journey. They must travel to the gates of Hades. And this card is just about, all of the suffering that you endure, just makes you better and better. And that which does not kill you makes you stronger. You must go forth and transformed each day in order to begin anew each time. So this is like you got to, you just have to keep going. You have to keep persevering and heading towards the horizon. This is Gates of the Netherworld, and there's nothing the ancient Greeks fear more than entering Hades before your time. This is when Odysseus must seek the advice of the prophet Tiresias in the underworld to get directions to Ithaca. So it's strange that no one else alive knows how to get to Ithaca. It doesn't. Anyway, I don't know. I didn't write it. So this is face your fears, face the shadow, face you have to face it head on in order to move forward. So I love, of course, this is the man who did the entire Inferno Oracle, right? So I love this take on the gates of hell, right? And those reds and just so it's also I like how surreal it is, how indistinct it is, how trippy. Anyway. This is Sightless Seer, and Sightless Seer, Tiresias is cursed, you might say, with perfect vision. He cannot see, but he can perceive. He is the one who knows all of the terrible things that are going to happen to Oedipus, or Oedipus, and however you happen to pronounce that. And he knows what has to be done. And this is the card. Reminds me of the Queen of Swords in the tarot, of knowing the edit that you need to make. Something has to be cut. Something has to happen. Like there's this difficult thing that has to happen. In Odysseus's case, he must go between Scylla and Charybdis, and it's making those cuts and being aware of it. Sometimes, like one of the most annoying things you can say as a diviner is, the thing you have to do. But it's crucial to take an honest assessment of yourself instead of wishing for the best, wishing things were different. So, Blessed Ancestress. This is when uh, Odysseus meets his mother, Anticlea. So this card is, you can be about doing ancestor work, but it also can just be like thinking about the ideals of the people you most admire, either that your heroes, your loved ones, your family members. Either ask if they're alive, asking for their advice, but living up to the ideals of the people that came before you. Song of the Sirens. So it's very hard to depict sound in art, and I just think Paolo Barbieri did an amazing job of doing that with these rings of sound. These are the sirens. This is a Song of the Sirens. And the sirens famously have an alluring voice that will drag men to their deaths on the rocks. And they're not particularly visually appealing, but they're sonically very appealing. And so I love what he's done with Sea Spray. So this card is about lead thyself not into temptation. So do not distract yourself. I'm a very distractible person. So this is the like put your phone in airplane mode card, don't, if you're going to advance your plans, do not sabotage yourself if you can possibly help it. Which brings us to, and so the repeated motif of that ring appears again in Man at the Masts. Odysseus knows that he wants to hear the Song of the Sirens. He wants to be the one man alive who has heard their song. So he has his men chain him or tie him to the mast, and then he has them put wax in their own ears so they won't hear the sirens as they sail past. And then he, with himself tied, he can hear their songs, and the agony that he goes through, he's allowed to hear it. So this is like, if you plan ahead, if you get with careful preparation, you can put yourself through anything, and you can be a little reckless, have a good time. Scylla and Charybdis. Okay, so this is perilous passage. And Odysseus has to go between a rock and a hard place here. He has to go past Scylla, who will eat 6 of his men, or Charybdis, who would swallow the entire crew, the entire boat. So, well, what does he do? He goes by Scylla, who's going to eat 6 of his men. It's the lesser of two evils. And this may, means you might have to rethink your standards in life. And again, with an Oracle deck, we're talking about, metaphor here. But sometimes we do have to make sacrifices. Sometimes we do have to rethink like what we set out to do in order to see a thing done. So, uh, and again, the values of Odysseus are, there's the deck has a certain bias. This is a hero who is willing to make some difficult choices in order to win the day. And I think that makes this a very good deck to pick up, for when you're faced with some real tough challenges. And then it also, means there are probably sometimes you don't want to pick this deck up. So, proceed with caution. Dragged to the Depths. This is an interesting card. This is the earlier in the story, the crew is told, do not eat the cattle of the sun god, or you will be killed. They eat the cattle of the sun god, except Odysseus. And you'll see Odysseus right down here clinging to the mast. He's allowed to live. He didn't eat the cattle. But the west wind raises the tempest and all these terrible. Oh, look how, like, I mean, what an amazing job Barbieri did with that. Anyway, this card is consider the long-term ramifications. A lot of times we can let ourselves off the hook or just think like, I just got to do this for right now. I just got to get through today. I just have to, well, what about, and like we live in the moment, it's often seen as like wise to live in the moment, to live in the now. And this card is live in the far from now, live in the long from now, and think about what that scene is going to look like. And I think, this could be a very scary card for people because they think that this card is saying this is what's going to happen. And this card is not saying that. This card is saying, like, think about what it could look like, given your circumstances. And again, scale this to your own life. You're probably not going to get swallowed by the sea, You're probably just going to get swallowed by your decisions. Anyway. This card reminds me of, that like motivational poster of a cat hanging from a branch saying like, hang in there. And I also think there's just something like beautifully dopey about how Charybdis looks when she's looking up at him in this way. This was one of the most challenging cards for me because I just did not remember this moment in the Odyssey, and it's kind of hard to find. It's just a quick little verse in there. But this moment is Odysseus just feeling at the absolute, limit. It just seems like he's never going to make it to Ithaca. Everything is ruined. But it has been prophesized. He has been told he will set foot on Ithaca again. So this is the like, hang in there, kid. Like that day will come, and it does. So, card 25, something that made me happy when I first read, I think it was the Fagles translation of the Odyssey. I didn't realize that half of the story takes place once he gets back in Ithaca. I think we're mostly familiar with the sea monster parts and the bat, the witches and the sirens and the battles and the deceptions, and half of the story is Odysseus and the suitors back on Ithaca. And because I didn't know that, I found it a little tedious the first time I read it. Now I feel like it really is much better in the Emily Wilson translation, but I was relieved that half of the deck is not back in Ithaca. But anyway, this is Appointed Arrival. I did not tell you the name of the last card. That was Adrift in the Void. Anyway, Appointed Arrival. This is Odysseus is back in Ithaca, and he's alive, and that's great. But he's going to be more than alive. He can do better. He has been made rich. He spent some time among the Phaeacians, and they gave him rich gifts, richer than he even left Troy with, if you can believe it. And this card is about like, you've achieved much, but it could be even better. Like you can improve upon perfection, which is kind of a tall ask from an Oracle deck, but like there it is. We can go beyond this. Cloak of Deception. So this is when Odysseus is back, if the suitors realize who he is, they will kill him. So wisely, Athena disguises Odysseus as an old beggar in filthy rags. And this card is all about hiding your light. There's times to not put yourself completely out there. There's times to let other people be the ones to speak. There's times to sort of dim yourself play your cards close to your chest. There's two cards that mean this in this deck. This one is more strongly just about focusing on self. The other card's more about planning. But there and so if you're going to put a card in the deck that's like hide your light, there's another card. You should probably put a card in the deck that's reveal your light, and look like that. That's in this deck. Ardent Allies. So this is the beautiful reunion of Odysseus and his son Telemachus. Now, I've heard some people say Telemachus. I've always heard it as Telemachus, but if you're a Grecophile and you know that I'm wrong, then I apologize. To Odysseus and Telemachus, this is, you cannot do everything on your own. I think a lot of us feel like we're supposed to take everything on ourselves, and that it is weakness to share the load. But that is folly. If this card appears, make sure that you're sharing the burden with those who love you. Beggar at the Feast. I couldn't get the idea of that. I know that's a song in Les Miserables and, Beggar at the Feast, or Beggars at the Feast. But this moment is Odysseus is in his own land. He's going to the palace. That's his palace. He is king of Ithaca, but he's going to it as a filthy beggar where he will be disrespected and he will be mistreated. And I just love the contrast there. So generally speaking, the advice people want to give you in this life is like, be the most, be big, don't hold back, be everything. And this card is like, get the lay of the land, listen, take the long road, take the wider view. I mean, there's a bunch of cards about that. Like Odysseus's worldview is to be crafty, and so that is a theme of this deck. And in this one, it is about, make a plan based on your observations first. Um, Oh, this is the saddest card in the whole thing. I mean, the saddest moment in all of the Odyssey is when he sees Argos, which is his faithful hound. The Argos was a puppy when he left for Troy, and the dog has waited his return for 20 years. And when he sees his master, his heart is filled with love. Like the Argos is unable to move. He's just a withered creature, and it just absolutely at the end. And he sees Odysseus is filled with love, and then he dies. And it's just the saddest thing in the whole book, more than anything else. And I said book, I know it's a poem. So this is about the power of empathy and kindness, and how your kindness that you give to others will be returned to you. It's just that's a good message. Poor little Argos. Divine Whispers. This is a card about trusting the message that you're trusting the message you're receiving, even though you don't know where it's coming from. This is Athena is guiding Penelope to act in a certain way, so that Odysseus's plan with the suitors will succeed. So just trusting that message, even though you're not sure why. A hero revealed. So we had a Cloak of Deception card, right? And where it was, hide your light. Well, this is the reveal your light card. Penelope sets a test for the suitors. She will marry the man who can string Odysseus's bow and then fire a shot through the 12 axes. And only Odysseus can do it. So this is the moment to like to be big, to live large, to not dim yourself, go for the full glory that is you. This is like the part, like if there's something you wish people knew about you, now's the time, if you want to make a video about being a guidebook author. Anyway, this is your card. So, again, like I feel like an Oracle guidebook, there should be balance in the cards, counterpoints among them. And this is one of those. So it's a great card. It's a really, really killer moment. And yeah, here's a mighty shot. And this is when Odysseus is the only one who can make this shot, and he wins back Penelope. So in this moment, this card is all about what is the thing only you can do. This is like what is your great skill? What is your talent? What is your flavor? What do you have to share with the world? What are you aching to do with your time on this planet? What is unique about you? And then hone your expertise, like develop those skills, develop your strengths rather than balancing your weaknesses, if that makes any sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Day of Reckoning. Man, not a lot of Oracle decks have a card like this one. So this is a little bit with sort of this card reminds me of my more controversial take on the Five of Swords. So, I mean, the suitors have been mistreating everyone on the island, the whole household of Ithaca. They've been greedy, some of them more than others. Some of them have been almost reasonable, but it doesn't matter. All of them are slaughtered by Odysseus and Telemachus. And so this is when it's time to not compromise. Now, earlier in the deck, we had Clash of Olympians, which is about using your words to win people over. But this is just winning conflict. Like, this is like not compromising. There are times to compromise. There are times to just absolutely not be cool. Like this is a time to like just not take no for an answer. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I mean, obviously, like um, people have agency, and I'm not saying to disrespect other people's agency. I'm just saying like you should not be participating in situations that you do not agree with. And embolden other people to take up your cause. Just like your right. This is like the moment for your righteousness and your righteous cause. So it's a bloody moment in the story. It's a bloody card, but it's the moment when the time is right. And again, scale it to your own life. Hearts reunited. This is to follow this, it's good to have a card like this. This is love, the power of love. Love, lean into the other, open to love, open to compassion and kindness with your body, with your mind, with your words, with your deeds, just with all of the self and open to the beloved in all that you do. It's just a sweet moment. And it's just like these two people have waited decades for this and it finally arrives. It's just like you, the reader or the listener of this poem, are just spent the whole time waiting for this reunion to happen, and it does. Adventures end. Odysseus, after the climax, that is the battle of the suitors in the hall, goes to visit his father Laertes, and the adventure comes to a close. And Athena, there's a potential civil war moment on Ithaca, and Athena comes and um, assuages the that conflict. And so it's a reminder that some things need to come in for a landing. Sometimes we can not be sure if we're done, not finished. We just want to keep on ideating, keep on keeping on, maybe not, maybe some changes. We don't, we're not sure yet. Maybe we're not ready. And if there was that card, Calypso's Castaway, that's like, it's time to begin. This is a card that says it's time to be done. It's time to come in for a landing. So it's like a reassurance that like every journey needs to end. And then after the end, we have Legend and Legacy. This is a reminder that everything you do will ripple throughout the ages, and people will remember you. They will remember. It's a little bit like that dog, the dog Argos, but it's beyond just your empathy and kindness. This is what you create. It will last. So you need to think about, what are you, what do you want to have? What do you want the memory of what you're doing to be? So it's a very exciting thing. So for example, if you're do you, if you're working on a guidebook for an Oracle deck, you probably want people to be reading with it even after you're gone. That's the hope, at least. My goodness. Anyway, but we're not talking about me. Let's see, back to the slideshow. Also, this deck has some fun little spreads. Los Scarabeo asked for 3 spreads for the deck. So here is the Odyssey Goddesses spread. This is an elemental spread. I think that rather than Odysseus, I think people's favorite characters from the Odyssey are the ladies. And so I thought about them and the 4 elements. So Athena reminded me of air. And so this is about your ambition and intellect and what you can do with your strategy in your life. Circe is the fire element in your life and the powerful spiritual transformation that can happen within you. Calypso is what your heart desires, what you're emotionally needing right now. And then Penelope is what hearth and home is to you right now and what will nourish and feed you at this time and what will provide support. This is the for heroic virtue spread. There are certain very iconic Greek virtues that from the era of the Odyssey that are felt throughout the story. And so Xenia is service to others. Xenia means guest friendship. And so, for example, when you would travel from island to island, you can expect to be treated well by others and to receive gifts and hospitality. People would feed you and welcome you. So this card in this position would represent, what you'd be doing for others. Hubris is what is your inner saboteur doing at this time? Just take a little drink of water. Thank you. So the inner saboteur card is like what's trying to trip you up there? What's getting in your own way? And then arete is excellence. It is like what is the pinnacle? What could you be doing for your greatest and highest good? What can you be doing at the peak performance level? And oh, this this image. Um it was the night before the deck was due, and I just was like putting together a kind of a goofy spread for Los Caribbean. I was just having some fun with some images and in Microsoft Paint. So I put together a spread based on sort of Odysseus's approach to the Odyssey, where like the adventure begins over here, and he sets out, and he would meet deadly perils, but he would have a heroic response to such perils, and then he would find a way to when he arrives at home, he's not finished yet. When you get home, you have to do some stuff. So, just a fun little spread to use with it. Now, most of the time when people use an Oracle deck, they just pull a card, they just pull one card and read the guidebook, and that's fine. But if you wanted to play with the deck in a bigger way, these are some things you can do. So anyway, if you went on this little journey with me, thank you. I think that Paolo Barbieri created a beautiful set of cards that really honors the writing of Homer and the words of Homer, at least. It was a poem, an oral poem. And I think they capture the energy and the magic and the bravery and passion of the story. And it was as a fan of Greek mythology and the poem itself, it was my deepest honor to be able to write a guidebook for it. And I hope that people get to enjoy it. And if you do, hey, well, let me know. But have a fabulous journey on your very own Odyssey as an oracle.